How do you see the world now? It appears everything is tragically nearing chaos. Yes, we hear of developments in science, we hear of wonderful breakthroughs even in the field of medicine. But as the world moves on, improves somewhat in certain areas of life, ultimately, it appears we are still within a very big war zone. And this is very much evidenced by all the stuff that we hear in terms of political struggles, economic worries, and even health issues. Many people always, especially even in the Western world, are plunged into a world of ultimate war. We are within a war zone, and no matter how you may want to call it, it is what it is. Unfortunately, many people don't even realize that the things which happen now seem to have a link with the happenings in Germany once a united nation had been shattered by war. They had been divided by ideological conflict. Now, after 1945, two governments now face each other across a concrete border. West Germany history, especially after the 1940s and before the 2000s, is West Germany. Until now, the covenant with God. But there was something very important. In fact, it was significant that the covenant which through Abraham had been given to them was renewed, and in that case, a pertinent sign had to be repeated, and that is the circumcision. Well, if you have a son, or even if you are a male and you have been circumcised, and probably, in case you never knew what happened and the reason behind it, you have to perfectly listen to this. This act put what was important first, and it appears it resonates with the record of Matthew 6:33 that says, "Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all things will be given unto you as well." But there is an important detail in all of this. After the circumcision, in fact, it was a prerequisite for another very important ritual, the Passover. Not a ritual in the sense of paganism, but a very important symbol which even resonates with us today. From Egypt to Canaan, it appears Israel was following what I call a chiastic process. In other words, some sort of a cycle, but in a reverse order. Remember, Israel came from Egypt. I mean, after the 400 years of labor. Then it was repeated to them to have circumcision before they could cross the Dead Sea. In fact, it was important for Israel to be circumcised before the Passover. And that happened. Then the Red Sea was crossed. This was a very important step. From then, they entered into the desert. The wilderness experienced 40 years wandering before they crossed the Jordan. Now, mark this important detail. From Egypt, they were circumcised, they had a Passover. They crossed the Red Sea, and now they plunged into some sort of Egypt for them again, this time the desert. Then again, they crossed the Jordan. But after crossing the Jordan, they now, in a reverse fashion, get circumcised and have the Passover. They are all symbols of the body and blood of a Redeemer who was yet to be born. Finally, they enter Canaan. Now, what is really happening? The first Passover was a symbol of liberation from Egypt, but the second Passover, celebrated by the new generation, was a symbol of their taking possession of the promised land. In the quick succession in the future, during the time of Christ, shortly before his crucifixion, Jesus gave this rite a new meaning with new symbols. The lamb became bread and the blood became wine. They are now symbols of the body, the blood of a Redeemer who brings us out of Egypt, that is, out of our sin, and brings us to the promised land that we know and we are yet to get, soon to come. Just as East Germany had to rediscover its spiritual identity before political liberation arrived, Israel had to rediscover whose they were before entering. You see, in the midst of conquest, it was important for worship to continue. In fact, it was important for an altar of worship to be raised. It's no surprise then why Moses had commanded that upon entering Canaan, an altar should be built on Mount Ebal and praise be given to God. But if you followed your history and even the sojourn of the Israelites, you would know that Mount Ebal represented the Mount of Curses. Probably it should have been on the Mount of Gerizim. The question is, why on Mount Ebal? Both the altar and the laws that were to be written on a monument and read to the people were related to blessings and curses, of course. But here, the blessing was pronounced on Gerizim and the curse on Ebal, according to Deuteronomy 17 or Deuteronomy 27, verse 12 to 13. In this very important detail, Jesus became a curse for us so that we might receive the blessing. More importantly, the Israelites had clearly depicted the importance of Christ being the curse for us by pronouncing and raising the altar on Mount Ebal. They were being antitypes of what Jesus would realize on the cross. On the cross, he became the curse that people and beneficiaries of his death would become the blessing. Clearly, in the midst of conquest, Israel sought a moment to rededicate itself to God. But it didn't happen just with that. It was very important for a special place of worship. The land had been subdued now by Israel. The territory had been divided among the most prominent tribes. Well, 7 tribes had not yet received their share. But before the tribes separated, a special and essential act was performed. That is the erection of the tabernacle, the center of Israel's worship. So clearly we see it was not only sufficient that the Israelites paused even amidst WARZONE to remember who liberated them, but it was equally significant that they gave a place specifically for the meeting with this liberator. In fact, it reminds me of the power of worship, even for a country like Germany. Just like Germany could not rebuild its nation without rebuilding its spiritual identity, Israel of old could not take the land without restoring its worship. No altar, no law, no sanctuary are equal to no victory. In the end, ultimate loyalty is always expressed in worship. Probably you are thinking, what do I do now? Well, wherever you find yourself, and especially if you are in a Western country, you would know how very true this situation is. But are you pausing for worship?